You're sitting in your car or maybe at your kitchen table or on your couch trying to make a decision, and you think, well, I could go with this option. And then immediately another thought claps back. Well, what if that's the wrong move? And then a slew of other thoughts come. What if I waste time doing this option? What if I waste money? What if I can't cut it and I fail? What if I give up the stability I have now and end up regretting it? And before you know it, you're in a thought spiral that ends up pushing you into overwhelm and you freeze. You just can't make a decision. Well, let's talk about what's happening here, because it's not all about the next step that you should take. A lot of it is about your relationship with risk and regret. Welcome to the Confident Christian Woman podcast, where we tackle questions about things that have been keeping you stuck in unfulfillment, dissatisfaction, or straight up misery. This is where you'll find the help you need to move forward from confusion, fear, or self-doubt into joy, fulfillment, and peace. This is where we become confident Christian women who not only believe, we obey. Now, let's dive in. Here's what someone in our community is struggling with. She said, I have a big decision to make and I don't want to make the wrong choice. I want to pursue a new career, but I have to go to school for it. It's either go to school or keep on the path I'm on, or try something else new to reach for my goals. Well, if you're in a similar boat, you're not just trying to make a career move. You're trying to avoid regret. You're trying to avoid what you think is failure, and you're trying to avoid missing God. And that pressure can paralyze you. So today, we're not only going to talk about how to make a decision, we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about why you feel so terrified of making the wrong choice. So let's start with decision paralysis, which a lot of us think of as being about having too many options. But it's not always about that. Sometimes it is that we have too many options, but it's not always about that. Sometimes, like in this case here that we have in front of us, it's about believing that there's only one right option. And if you miss that one right option, you will ruin everything. It's a belief that is rooted in fear, because somewhere along the line, you picked up the idea that God's will and God's way for you is a tightrope, and one misstep, one wrong choice, one wrong move, one tilting over the wrong way, and you'll fall off and you'll plummet to disaster. Proverbs 16 verse 9 says that the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his step. Notice in that verse that there's a partnership in that. You plan and God establishes, right? And also notice that there's an assumption of movement, not standing still until God drops a full blueprint on you. There's movement in that. So your decision paralysis may be revealing that you don't trust God to redirect you if you pick a path that turns out to be suboptimal. So here are a couple of questions for you to ponder and answer for yourself. These are not rhetorical questions. Answer them for yourself so that you can see the truth of what's going on with your decision paralysis. And here are your two questions. What do I believe will happen if I choose quote unquote wrong? What story am I telling myself about that possible outcome? All right, so ponder those if you're struggling with decision paralysis. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is fear of failure. Now, you might say to me, Chris, I'm afraid to fail, but let's interrogate that a little bit. Because failure is an event, and it's probably not that you're afraid of an event. You're afraid of what you think that event would confirm about you. right? Which is something like if I try it and it doesn't work, then I'm not as capable as I thought, or I'm a fool, or I misread God and I don't know how to hear from him, or I'll disappoint the people who I want to think well of me and I might even lose their approval, or I'll prove that I'm not who I thought I was. That's what you're afraid of. All of that stuff is what you're afraid of. You're afraid of what you're making failure mean. So all of this shows that your identity is tied up in your outcomes. So you are equating the results that you create in life with your worth and your value. It's no wonder that this decision feels life altering, because your whole identity is at stake. Your whole identity is at stake here. But what if a misstep on your part simply means that you're human? What if it doesn't have to mean anything more than you're growing and learning wisdom? What if you choose to unravel your identity from the results that you create in your life? What if failure is simply an opportunity to learn instead of a commentary on who you are? Those are all questions that you can be asking yourself to go beneath this fear of failing that is keeping you stuck in indecision. Hey, if you're listening and thinking, I don't want to miss this kind of encouragement and inspiration every week, then now's the time to hit follow. Because every Monday, I drop a new episode to help you take the next faithful, obedient step in your journey. Okay, let's get back into it. Now, let's talk about the spiritual pressure that comes with not wanting to, quote unquote, miss God. And it sounds really noble to say that, but what you really actually mean is that I don't want to be responsible for making the wrong move. Because as long as you don't choose, then you can't mess up. But James 1 verse 5 says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. Notice in this verse that God gives wisdom, not blueprints. He doesn't give 20-year guarantees. I don't know about anybody else, but I have not received any of that kind of guarantee from God. And he also does not give insurance against what you would see as a less than great outcome. Look at Abraham. God said to Abraham, go and I will show you. And he never gave Abraham a whole map. He didn't. And we see in scripture that Abraham's faith was counted to him as righteousness. He did not see the results of what God promised him, but he trusted that God would keep his word and take care of him and his family. And he moved because he trusted God. Movement takes trust, but it also builds trust. Meanwhile, stagnation encourages, and it's like a petri dish for fear. So ask yourself, how much do I trust God to redirect me if I choose, quote unquote, wrong? And I keep saying quote unquote for this wrong because that's a judgment that you're making on whether it's wrong or not, okay? You get to decide if this option is wrong. All right. No, I don't think we can have this discussion without talking about perfectionism. Because sometimes it's not that you're indecisive. It might be that you're a slave to perfectionism, which is often just fear disguised as productivity, right? You're trying to make things perfect. So you're telling yourself you're being productive in trying to make things perfect, but it's just fear. And it's sneaky, right? It can sound like if I gather enough data, I can eliminate the risk. But guess what? Risk is a part of being human. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9 says, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. That's what Paul said. You don't get to fully experience God's power if you never risk weakness. God said, my power is made perfect in weakness. So if his power is made perfect in weakness and you refuse to be weak, then how is God's power going to show up perfectly and fully in your life? Perfectionism will keep you in environments where you already know how to win. But taking a step of faith will pull you into places where you don't know how to win. And those are places of growth and maturing. You don't grow and mature in a place where you know everything. So ask yourself, what would change if I accepted that discomfort, maybe even messiness, is part of obedience? All right, now let's talk about cost. Because whichever option you choose, it's going to cost you something. So for example, the person who wrote the question that we're dissecting today is thinking about the cost of going back to school, which includes money and time and energy, and it also includes the discomfort of some temporary instability that she will experience, right? Because when she leaves the stability of what she already is in, then there will be some temporary instability, and there's discomfort in that. So that's also a cost. But you also have to look at the cost of staying in indecision. That costs you resentment. It costs you unsatisfied curiosity, right? Because you have this curiosity that you just never satisfy. It costs you regret. And it costs you the discomfort of stagnation. Every path has a cost. Every path has a cost. So you may think that you're choosing between risk and safety, but you're not. You're actually just choosing between different kinds of risk. And so here are a couple, actually here's one more question for you to ask yourself that might be a helpful question for you. 5 years from now, which regret would sting more? Not trying, or trying and learning something about yourself even if you fail? And here are a few more questions that you can use for reflection on this whole situation. If you answer these questions, it can help you to dispel the fear that you're feeling and get you out of the stuckness that you're in. So here we go. What am I trying to avoid by continuing to indulge in indecision? What am I afraid that this decision will reveal about me? What if my identity was secure in Christ? What would I do? What would I do then? What would my decision be? To what extent do I believe that God's will is dependent on me choosing right or wrong? And I put right and wrong in quotes. To what extent do I trust God to redirect me if I choose quote unquote wrong? All right, so how do you move forward from here? Because you do need to do this self-reflection, because you need to understand what is actually at the root of this indecisiveness, but you also need to some practical action steps, right? Well, you can start much smaller than your brain probably wants you to, because for many of us who are high achieving women, we think that we have to start with a big giant leap, and we don't. Let's use our original questioner as an example, the person who wrote the question that we're chewing on today. Instead of asking herself, do I commit to school for X number of years? She can try asking herself instead, what's one exploratory step that I can take? So for example, she might come up with the idea to talk to somebody in the field, or to take one class, or to shadow somebody who's already working in the area where she is desiring to work. It doesn't have to be a giant leap. Psalm 119 verse 105 says, your word is a lamp to guide my feet and a light for my path. A lamp doesn't show you 10 miles ahead. It shows you the path right ahead of you that you can take your one next step. And so that's what you're looking for here. You're looking for the next simple, doable step, just one. All right, now let's wrap it up. You are not stuck because you lack options, okay? You're stuck because this decision feels like a whole vote, a referendum on who you are and your identity. You're making it mean a whole bunch of stuff about your identity. But your worth really isn't in question here. That was established when Jesus died on the cross for you. That's what you're worth. You're worth the life of God, the Son of God. And God is not sitting on the edge of his throne, biting his fingernails waiting to see if you're going to ruin everything by choosing wrong. You plan and he establishes. So you can choose to make your plan, pray for wisdom, and then take a step forward. And then trust that if you need to be redirected once you start to move, he's faithful to give you that too. Thanks for listening today. If you'd like extra support, don't forget to grab your free Clarity Roadmap. It's a free guide that's designed to give you a quick jump start out of feeling stuck. Remember, you don't have to have all the answers. You only need your one next step. And this free roadmap is a great place to start. You'll find the link in the show notes.